a lot of folks are late to this issue, and Todd Bensman, who is the National Security Fellow at the Center for Immigration Studies, has been working on this for a couple of years exhaustively. He's written 2 books on the subject. He's been at the border almost innumerable times, and it's been a huge service to the country. So we'll hear from Todd, and if you have questions, this is your chance. And are you staying for dinner, or are you going right after?
No, I'll stay.
Okay, he's going to be here tonight. So he's a real resource, and he's very accessible to a lot of us. So, ladies and gentlemen, Todd Bensman. Todd?
Okay, I guess I'll just stand here between you and your dinner, too. So, no, thank you, Ed, not just for the kind introduction, but also for magnifying my reporting so often on your media and your radio show. Thank you for that. I think I'm on there like probably every week or something now. So I'll correct you on one thing. It is true that I've been reporting down there on the border for 2 years, constantly for about 2 years. But actually, my time at the border goes all the way back to 2006. I am a recovering journalist, as I like to say, and you can't recover unless you admit that you were one once. And that job, I did that for 23 years, and that took me to the border for the first time, covering it when I was working for Hearst newspapers in 2006 in San Antonio. And I was an investigative reporter, and I said, well, what do you want me to do? And they said, well, just win us some awards. That was my job. So I said, well, that leaves the field really open for me to cover things. And at that time, the sexiest story in San Antonio was the southern border, not too far away. And Mexico was in the midst of a very, very bloody drug war, civil drug war, 200,000 civilians dead on both sides. So I started covering the border, gun smuggling first, and asylum, and you name it, I covered. And then eventually covered the issue of Iraqis. We were in the Iraq War at that time, coming all the way into Texas through Mexico from Iraq, along with people from all the Arab countries. It had never been reported before, really. So I did a 5-part series on that. The awards did come, National Press Club for the gun smuggling and for the Iraqis coming. After that, I spent the next 10 years working for the Texas Department of Public Safety's Intelligence Counterterrorism Division. In their intel, they were looking for unconventional people to kind of rebuild their intelligence division. That's the state police. So, pretty much nonstop since 2006, I've had something to do with that border. And I tell you all that by way of background to emphasize the fact that I have never, ever seen that border as screwed up, upside down, chaotic, insane as it is now, and as it has been for the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, I interview Border Patrol agents all the time who have been down there for 20 years and have never seen anything this insane going on at the border. The subtitle of my book is How Joe Biden Unleashed the Greatest Border Crisis in U.S. History, because by every single metric, it actually is the worst border crisis, mass migration crisis ever to have stricken the United States. We are in the midst of a truly historic event for the country. This one goes in the history books, and it's not over. We're in the middle of it. I wrote a book about just the first 2 years of it and how it got started, but this thing, it ain't over, not by a long shot. A few years ago, when Trump was in office and he was having kind of what looks like a modest swell at the border right now under his term, was a really big spike at that time. The Obama-era DHS Secretary Jay Johnson was interviewed, and at that time they were having like 4,000 a day cross the border. And Jay Johnson told the interviewer, man, when I woke up in the morning and the numbers were more than 1,000 a day, I knew I was going to have a bad day. 1,000 a day is just out of control. That's a crisis, more than 1,000 a day. And he said that to kind of take a jab at Trump for having 4,000 caught at the border that day. Yesterday, we had 14,000. 14,000 crossed that border. Yesterday. Today, it's going to be the same. Right now, that border, I mean, everything that's happened in the last 2.5 years has broken every single record in U.S. history on the border. There is no record that does not stand smashed and shattered by what happened on Inauguration Day 2021. Okay? But on average, we probably have had about somewhere between 7,000 and 9,000 a day every day for 2.5 years, just to give you an idea. The numbers are unbelievable. In the very first year of the Biden administration, 2021, we broke the record for the most apprehensions at the border in American history since we started keeping records in 1960. Kennedy administration, I think it was the Eisenhower administration put that one in. Let's start tracking that stuff at the border. 1.7 million apprehensions. That's how many times Border Patrol laid hands on somebody. 1.7 million in 2021. The next year, it was 2.4 million. This year, the numbers are just about in. We're not quite finished with the fiscal year, but it's going to probably be in excess of that. And so it goes in stair-stepping escalation. It just never ends. We have had probably on the order of 9 million apprehensions, the number of times that a Border Patrol laid hands on an immigrant in the last 30 months. That doesn't mean 9 million entered. There's reasons for that, but what we do know is that we have probably had somewhere in the neighborhood of 4.8 million foreign nationals actually be allowed to enter the country and stay. And that includes a category called gotaways who are crossing in undetected, and that's a conservative number. It's probably 6 million or something like that, but I play it conservative. Probably 4.8 million new people are in the country. All these images that you see in New York City, in Chicago, Denver, Massachusetts, all that chaos in the streets, of course, of course. We predicted it on your radio show 2 years ago. I told you that was going to happen, didn't I? That it was going to be seen and felt in the streets of America, of every city in America. I guarantee you that it's happening right here in St. Louis. Your media is just not reporting it. You got to go to Facebook and find the local micro media to see them. But I guarantee you St. Louis is just jammed. Their schools, everything is just collapsing here. So how did this happen? I want to just tell you a quick story. Well, let me paint a picture. I don't have photos. I guess they couldn't do that. But I remember the first time I went down there after Inauguration Day. I went to a little town called Roma, Texas, down in the Rio Grande Valley in the southern tip of Texas. And I made my way down in the middle of the night down to the river. And that night I saw what looked like a D-Day invasion. It was just rubber rafts, 5 abreast, 6 abreast, just coming over all at the same time, hitting the Texas bank, unloading, going back, filling, unloading. And you could see flashlights. This wasn't just happening at the spot that I happened to be at. You could look all the way down the river as far as you could see and see the same thing was happening river wide and all the way upstream to where it bent and you couldn't see anymore. Same thing. What struck me about that was that on our side, there was Border Patrol and National Guard and Texas troopers standing there welcoming all of them in. Right this way. Go up that riverbank and they'll take care of you. Watch your step. There's rocks over here. Let me help you with that baby, ma'am. So that the natural order of the world was kind of turned on its head, right? That's not the border I know. The border I know is those people crossing have to run and hide. They have to have scouts tell you when to make your dash for it. The cops, the Border Patrol, everybody's chasing after them, and they're going to deport them, especially when Trump was in office. You're going to get sent back. This was something where I'll never forget, the Border Patrol agents knew the raft pilots by first name. Hey, Jose, how's it going? How many more you got over there? Siete, cinco, mas. They knew each other. Like, remember that cartoon where you had I guess he was like the wolf and the lamb, and they would punch in for work? Or I forget the name of that thing, and they were friends all the way up until they punched in for work, and then they went after each other, or one chased the other one. Then they'd come back out and they knew each other, and they were like, hey, Fred. It was like that. And that was the thing that really turned the light on in my head that this is really, really unusual. Something really different and new is happening here. We are welcoming them in. We are arranging with the other side how many loads so that we can coordinate our, we were consummating a relationship with the cartels on that side. Every one of these migrants that were crossing that night, and I just was down there last week, they're still doing this, has a wristband. They have a wristband on because there were so many coming that the cartels on the other side had to come up with a new system of inventory control. You give us your $5,000 and we give you a wristband so that you can show it to the pilot, to get on the boat. And every single one of them had, even infants, around their little feet or their little ankles. Everybody had one of these things. It was from the cartel. And they would just tear them off as they got in, and there were literally millions of them all over the place. We knew that we were collaborating with the cartels directly, right together by first name basis. So how did this happen? I'm going to give you, the reason I'm going to tell you how this happened is it's prominent reporting in my book, Overrun, and B, it seems to be a point of contention. I was testifying 2 days ago before the Judiciary Committee, and Democrat after Democrat, I was a Republican witness. I don't know why the Democrats never pick me. But Democrat after Democrat, Jayapal, I think was the ranking Democrat there, just went on, hey, this is not, Joe Biden did not do this. Why do you people keep saying that Joe Biden did this? It seems to be a point of contention that, like, who caused this and why is this happening? And I'm going to just tell you the truth about why this is happening and why I think it's Joe Biden, why I know it's Joe Biden and their policies. In the year leading up to the election, Donald Trump had this thing under pretty good control. We were having with Remain in Mexico, he had this policy where he would make everybody who got caught would be pushed back immediately. Families, children, it didn't matter. Everybody pushed back. If you wanted to apply for asylum, you had to wait for it in Mexico. Of course, that took the whole incentive out. There's no fun in the great Mexican dream. Nobody wants to be there for 5 years waiting. They want to wait inside America. So they stayed home. They didn't come. If you crossed through Guatemala or Mexico and didn't apply for asylum, you were ineligible. And we would send you back home all the way. We would put you on an ice air and send you to Tegucigalpa, and we did, thousands and thousands of them. This is before the pandemic. The numbers before the pandemic had had dived to somewhere in the 30,000 a month range, which at the time we were like, wow, that's still terrible, 30,000. Oh my God, we haven't seen anything like that since then, not even close. We get 200,000 every month now for a long, long time. 30,000 was he bequeathed this incredible border control to the Biden administration. Then he put in place Title 42. I want you to just remember that. It matters. Title 42 was a pandemic control health measure that required Border Patrol to everybody they catch got sent straight back to Mexico, and you don't get to apply for asylum. So people just stayed home. Why spend $10,000 to get here when I'm going to just get stuck in Mexico and lose my money? It's just that simple. It's that simple. I'm not spending the money if I'm going to end up back in Mexico. One of the best things that Trump did was he told Mexico, you guys are taking them. You're taking all of them. Everybody we push back, you're taking them. And if you don't like it, shut down your own border with Guatemala. Go ahead and put your National Guard down there. So, and if you don't, we're going to put progressive trade tariffs on every auto part that comes over the border and everything else. See if I'm not serious. Go ahead, test me on the tariffs. And the Mexicans were like, whatever you want, sir. And they put those National Guard down on that southern border. I wanted to go see it. In about January 2020, I went to Tapachula, Mexico, which is the border right there. It's 30 miles. It's a big landing spot for migrants coming in from Guatemala. Hundreds of thousands, millions have gone through there. So I just wanted to go check out how the National Guard thing was working out, and I was surprised. When I got there, there were just throngs and throngs of migrants pouring over into Tapachula, even though they knew that they couldn't get in under Trump. So I just started asking, why are you coming? What's going on here? And the answer I got was very surprising. They told me that they had been listening to all the Democratic presidential candidates in their debates. And they all saw the hands go up when they said, hey, who's going to give them free medical care? Who's going to decriminalize entry? Every one of them. Who's going to be, and they were arguing, they would try to compete with each other about who was going to give the most stuff to the immigrants, who was going to let the most in. There were like 15 candidates there, including Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Both of them were right in there with them. We are a nation of immigrants. They heard that. They all heard it. They also saw that the polls, migrants are not dumb people. I spend so much time with the immigrants. I spend all my time with the immigrants. These days, when I go to the border, I don't even stay on the U.S. side anymore. I go right over and get a hotel on the Mike side, as we call it, because that's where you find the real story. That's the primary sources, the immigrants. Just like down in Tapachula, they're smart. They listen to every single policy coming out of Washington. They're listening to all the candidates, and they're watching the polls. And the polls were telling them Donald Trump's going to lose in a few months, and we're coming into Mexico because we want to position ourselves for the day he loses. And that's why they were coming. For all week long, they were all telling me, well, look what the Democrats are going to let us all in. So that's when it started. It started months before even the national election. When Biden and Harris won the nomination, the next day the numbers went like this. They started crossing. Trump was still pushing them. They're still pushing them back, but they were massing all along the border. I wrote about this. I reported. They are massing on the border in all these border towns saying they think Trump's going to lose. So there was the transition period between the time Biden was announced the winner, and when he took office on Inauguration Day, somewhere around 6 weeks is the transition period, Mexico did something very interesting that nobody ever talks about. The Mexican Congress, the party of Obrador Lopez, put forth very quietly, sneaky, stealthy, put forward a law that, and they chambered it in the rifle for the American national election. And remember, Trump had been pushing all these people back, and Mexico was stuck with them, especially families. And their law said you must take care of families. Anybody with a child under 7 years old, you have to take care of them, Mexican law. So the 58 detention centers in Mexico were jam-packed with problem families, high needs, milk, formula, diapers. We got to provide all this stuff. It's expensive. They're filling our detention centers. So the law that they put together said you have to release all of them. You cannot detain families. That was the law. On November 6th, right after the U.S. election, when it was clear that Biden won, they pulled the trigger on the law, and they passed it. No press in the U.S., no press in Mexico, and they set it to go into effect 60 days after the election, so that it actually went into effect on 10 days minus to the inauguration day. 10 days. I interviewed Trump's ambassador to Mexico about this, and he said when they found out about it, it was too late and they hit the roof. All of his counterparts had kept it a secret from him on purpose, so that Trump would not be able to have a chance to do anything about that Mexican law. So 10 days before Inauguration Day, all the gates opened and tens of thousands of family groups flooded forward to join the tens of thousands that were already on the northern border for Inauguration Day. 2 and 3 days before Inauguration Day, they couldn't even contain themselves. They were doing bonsai rushes against CBP officials out on the bridges in El Paso, in Acuna, and several other places. They couldn't even contain themselves. There were thousands. They would just bonsai rush. Our guys would, under Trump, still would get their riot gear and helmets and clubs and everything and just beat them back. So then on Inauguration Day, the administration announced a whole raft of the things that they had been promising. One of them was, we're going to let in families, the ones that had just gotten released. They knew they had just gotten released and we're all waiting there. We're going to make an exception in Title 42. They won't be pushed back. If you have a family with kids under 7, we are guaranteed letting them all in. Unaccompanied minors, anybody that comes in without a parent, guaranteed 100% in. Pregnant women at 6 to 7 months, guaranteed, and postpartum, guaranteed you're coming in. So on Inauguration Day +1, you had 150,000 people pour in over that border. It literally started on that day and never ended because of this Mexican law, the new policies, and I have always suspected that it was coordinated between the Lopez government and the transition team. I can't prove it, but I'll bet you that it was coordinated like that. So that is why we had Title 42 still in place, but they had just opened up they tore open these massive exceptions, and they came pouring in. So when I went down there and saw what I saw with the boats, those were the families and the pregnant women, all of them exactly 7 months. They knew, do I fit the demographic that they're letting in? And then they would come in. Well, This created a need for processing duty. So when 50,000 families just poured in, families members poured in, they would have to pull Border Patrol from 100 miles to come in. They were pulling guys from the northern border. They were pulling people from airports. They couldn't keep up. They literally couldn't process them in. And that left hundreds of miles of border completely undefended. And that's when you started having runners, the people that weren't the demographics. They weren't the chosen demographics. They were the single guys. They were the criminals. They were the people who had been deported 3 or 4 times and couldn't afford to get caught again. And they started pouring in, running through the gaps into the interior of the country. And that's why, to this day, we have about 1.8 million runners who became gotaways in the interior of the country, at least. Okay, so I hope that clears that up. This has a beginning date to it. I wrote a column in February of 2020 saying this was going to happen, and then in November saying, watch out, the biggest mass migration crisis that you will ever witness is going to start next month. It was so obvious to those of us who were down there. So, what's happening now? First of all, the administration, there were people in the administration who thought that the midterm elections would cut them deeply, that there would be so much blue, in the trash can that, we'll have to change our policy. But they didn't. They didn't get cut deep enough. So after the midterms, they just had it gushered on. All spigots on. All spigots on. People still just pouring in. The Title 42 that I keep talking about ended on May 12th. And you guys might remember that they promised us, hey, we're going to get really tough. We're putting this new thing in place. You can get a phone app on your phone, and I've never met a migrant that was not fully equipped with a cell phone, completely attached to all social media, and make an appointment to get a free pass over the bridge, over our bridges. You can just schedule an appointment, and we're going to just let you walk in over all of our land ports and let you in that way. So they started doing that in about 2022 in full, we don't even know to this day how many, but we do know that probably on the order of 40,000 people a month are being let in this way on the bridges. So when the administration says, we got this under control, the numbers are dropping, the numbers aren't dropping. They're just being moved to the bridges. That's it. The same number are pouring through, either through CBP-1 or illegally crossing. We predicted this. It was very obvious what would happen at the end of Title 42. They said, we're going to be tough. We're going to beat everybody who crosses illegally with a stick. Metaphorically, we're going to do terrible things to you if you don't just do this CBP-1 app. So there was a pause in June because people were waiting to see, well, what's going to happen? Are they going to really beat us with this stick? And so the first tentative ones tested it out, and guess what? They got let right in, just like before. They get a notice to appear, a pinky finger kind of honor system that you will self-report to an ICE office sometime in the city that you pick to go to, and you're going to be released on your own recognizance. They put them on the buses down at the border, NGOs that are arranging for these buses, and there's just been this conveyor belt. I first reported the conveyor belt. I saw this in action in, I want to say in early February of 2021. I went down there and I was like, oh my God, they're just filling bus after bus after bus with these people. Can I see your papers? And they're showing me their papers, and it's like personal recognizance release, report in sometime in the next year in Chicago or wherever. We're letting you go. 7 days a week, all day long, all month long, all year long, these buses are roaring off the border, carrying these illegal immigrants into the interior. Those are CBP-1 people and illegal crossers. It doesn't matter. You all get in and you go wherever you want. Lately, the immigrants are getting impatient. They don't want to wait 3 weeks or 5 weeks for their CBP-1 application to get approved. So they realize if we just peel off the line and cross illegally, they're going to let us in anyway, right away. And so that's what's happening now. The numbers of illegal crossings is like this. The 14,000 that I talked about yesterday, that's the people that just said, I'm not doing that thing. They're not beating me with a stick. Why am I going to wait over there? I'm coming in right now. So in the last week, I want to go south. I spent a lot of my time on the border in Mexico, but I also spent a lot of my time in Panama and Costa Rica and Nicaragua and Guatemala, the whole trail. And one of the hallmarks of this mass migration crisis is that it has the highest percentage of people from around the world ever in the history of America to be reaching the border. 40% of everybody this is not your grandparents' mass migration crisis. 40% of everybody who is hitting that border is from 160 countries other than Mexico and Central America. I was in Matamoros recently in a hotel there, and I go down to breakfast for the free, the continental breakfast, and every table is filled with Kyrgyzstanis. My whole hotel is filled with Kyrgyzstanis, almost all Kyrgyzstanis. There were some Dagestanis in my hotel too. I met my first Dagestanis there. And there were some Belarusians and some regular Russians in there too, in the mix. This mass migration crisis has brought people in from every single country in Africa. Somebody was telling me, I said, hey, just go ahead, name a country in Africa, and I'll tell you if I've met somebody. Then somebody said, Burkina Faso. And I said, yeah, I meet those guys all the time. There's Burkina Fasoans, or I don't know what you call them, but the point I'm trying to make is that the entire world has heard about this incredible thing that the Americans have done. They can't believe it. I talk to them. I'm in depth talking, having long conversations. Nobody can believe this. Hey, did you hear what they're doing? Everybody's getting in. They're letting everybody in. It's incredible. Let's go. It's a chance of a lifetime. We'll be able to get into the United States, and they don't even really care who we are. They don't even know who we are. I can fill shopping bags down on that border with discarded ID cards. They toss their passports. They toss their ID cards. I have them in my office. Bags full of just discarded IDs because they're abusing our asylum system. When they cross, they'll say, I want asylum. And if they have a card that shows that they had residency in Chile for 5 years, then that's an ineligibility. They'll probably get turned down right away. So they throw those away because they're damning evidence. But by the same token, we have no clue who they are. My name is Mickey Mouse. And we're like, come on in. We'll take your fingerprints, Mickey Mouse. And that's what's happening. The Department of Homeland Security, OIG, just released an incredible report last week that showed the Biden administration did not take addresses from like hundreds of thousands. They just, and there's a requirement. You know, if we're going to give you this personal recognizance, pinky fingered report in on your own, like later or whenever you want, you kind of have to be able to, you know, follow up. And so you have to put a verified address in there. Well, guess what? Most of these immigrants just made one up. Oh yeah, 123 Main Street. And that's what the report found, 123 Main Street, everywhere. They had addresses that don't exist. They just made them up. Hundreds of thousands. We can't even track them. They created this problem for the next Republican administration to ever even be able to get them out if we even wanted to. But back to the diversity of nationalities, and Ed, bring the hook out whenever. I don't know how much time I've got, but leave enough time for Q&A, I guess.
Yep, pretty soon then.
Okay. What I want to say about that is, in the Darien Gap, there's a passage between Colombia and Panama. I have been there. I have reported on that. And in that Darien Gap, in a typical year, years past, there might be 10,000 or less from around the world crossing through. And that was a lot. I mean, that was a major national security threat. Our Homeland Security enterprise worried about that all the time. There were terrorists crossing through there. There were people from all the Middle Eastern countries crossing through there. In 2022, 250,000 crossed through there. It went from 7,000 to 250,000 because the whole world is on the way. For 2023, it's going to turn out to be 350,000 crossing through there. Last month, 82,000 alone crossed through just in one 4-week period through the Darien Gap. 82,000, according to the Panamanian Cinefront. This month, it's worse. I've got friends down there who are there right now who are tweeting out. Look up Michael Yon, Y-O-N. And Ben Berquam. They're in the Gap right now. Oscar Blue Ramirez. Those guys are down there right now, and they're filming it from a drone. And it's just this unbelievably wide, like 3 times as wide as this auditorium room, of people shoulder to shoulder packed for as far as you can see into the horizon, coming to the American border. This is like incredibly insane. This is just unbelievable, the numbers that are crossing. So when I talk about how bad it's been for the last 2.5 years, you just ain't seen nothing yet. The worst is on its way right now. The topic of my hearing testimony last week was terrorist entry at the southwest border. 258 people have crossed that border who are already on the FBI's terror watch list. When I was doing intel, we might have had 2 or 3 a year, maybe 20 a year if you count the Mexican side and down to Panama, because we catch them down there too on their way in. 20 a year tops. I think in 2019 we had 0. 258 as of July. By the time we're about to get the August numbers out, I'm going to guess it's going to be 275, 280 who are on the FBI's terror watch list. And those are the ones we caught. Think about the people that are runners and gotaways. They're going to be terror watch listed people that got through that we never caught. And my book, America's Covert Border War, which was my first book, it's not here, but you can order it on Amazon, is all about the terror threat of infiltration. But more importantly, it's about why we haven't had an attack in this way to date since 9/11, is because we put these programs into place, these great counterterrorism programs that have been highly effective. The book just cites chapter and verse of cases of real true blue terrorists that we caught through these programs down there and deported so that they weren't in a position to attack. That's what we do. We call them special interest aliens. We tag them that way. That requires FBI to go down and do interviews, eyeball-to-eyeball interviews, enhanced security investigations with all our partners, our military and intelligence partners around the world, whatever we can do. And if there's derogatory intel on them, we deport them. Well, guess what? This mass migration crisis has rendered all of those programs null and void. They're unviable. We're not doing them anymore. We typically had 3,000 or 4,000 special interest aliens a year that we would catch. We had a little bit of a trouble interviewing all of those, 3,000 and 4,000. Well, we had 75,000 special interest aliens cross in just the last 9 months. Just the last 9 months. Nobody's interviewing them. That's just not happening. They're letting them through. They are accidentally releasing terror watch listed. There was another DHS OIG report that just came out in July about a Colombian on the watch list that the Border Patrol just shooed right through with everybody else. And then they discovered it later. TSA actually discovered it in the airport, but it was too late. Why did we make that mistake? Our counterterrorism programs that we have down there. According to the OIG report, because of the mass migration crisis, they were too busy. They couldn't open their emails. They couldn't send emails. They weren't picking up their voicemail. Everybody, just the whole system collapsed, and they let this terrorist through. They let another terrorist go from a Lebanese Venezuelan who swam the Rio Grande in this mass migration crisis. He flagged on the watch list. The FBI in that case did go down and do their job. They found that he was highly, he was a high risk, high derogatory information on him. Do not let this guy go under any circumstance. And somebody from DC ordered him released because he was at risk of catching COVID in the detention centers. That guy's running around in Detroit right now seeking an asylum claim. Okay, we're going to take Q&A right now.
Come on, go quick. Go. You go. Go quick.
Two quick questions. What did the number 250,000 in what time period?
In the Darien Gap, that was in fiscal year 2022. It's going to be 350 this year.
350,000 came through that year?
Yeah,
Okay.
Came in from Colombia into Panama, and the Panamanians count them.
Just from Panama?
From Colombia through the Darien Gap. All of them are on their way here. Nobody's stopping.
Do you know what Aslan is? Have you mentioned that in your book?
Remind me.
You know, it's
been
published in the New American for a long time.
Yeah.
The Aslan plan is the plan put together by international communism to push people into the Northwest through legal and illegal immigration and take back the Southwest and add it back into Mexico. I'm shocked. I've talked to people in Arizona. They don't know what it is. Politicians down there should all know what that is. And they didn't. The person I talked to didn't. I wrote it up in my website 12 years ago, and people never bothered to read it, I guess.
I have three questions, if I can get away with it. First, why does Mexico allow millions of people from other countries to transit Mexico, which is 1,000 miles? I mean, what does Mexico get out of that? Why do they permit that?
Mexico permits that because it's in their national interest to not get stuck with the bill and responsibility of deporting them around the world. It's expensive, not only to deport them and block them at their border, but if they're just passing through to the U.S., and it's like a hot potato. They're all playing the game of hot potato.
But Mexico's southern border is only 100 miles. Can't they stop them at their border?
Yeah, they did under Trump. They did a pretty good job of it under Trump. And during COVID, between the Guatemalans and the Mexicans, they did a great job of shutting that down. They can do it. But what happens is I'm going to tell you what the reality is, that when there's a big migrant buildup down there, the migrants riot, burn, rampage, take over government buildings, beat up regular Mexicans. And so the Mexicans and the Guatemalans want these people to just move through. I've written a lot about what I call ant operations, and this is a tactic, a technique that the Mexicans pull, like during even Trump, when they were supposed to be holding them all south of Tapachula. Well, there'd be 50 or 60,000 build up, and especially the Haitians, man. I'm not denigrating Haitians as a group, but man, those guys are wild. When they don't get to move forward, they will riot, burn tires, burn buildings, beat up on the cops, the whole thing. And after a while, the Mexicans just say, move, we'll bring up 500 buses, and you can just move, go through, and they'll wheel up 500 buses and fill them up. Go ahead.
The 5 million or so who have been processed by the U.S. government at the border. You mentioned fingerprints. Do we get fingerprints for everybody? Other better forms of, DNA or better biometric identification so they could be identified at some future date?
Yes, most of the time we are at least collecting some biometrics. There are times when, like I think right now is one of the times when they just can't even deal. They will just release them into the street and just say, whatever, we won't process anybody. But most of the time they do try to get some fingerprints. They take facial recognition photographs in the field processing process. But remember, a lot of these folks are coming from nations that don't have criminal databases that you could ping off, or you can't do a security vetting for Haitians or Syrians or Cubans, or Afghanistanis. You're not going to get the Taliban to agree to run some checks for you. We don't want to. You're bad guys. Go ahead.
Another question? Did you have a third, John?
Yeah.
Did you have a third?
Go ahead, Gwen.
Could you tell us anything that you know about Chinese nationals coming in through the southern border?
About the Chinese nationals, we probably had 20,000 Chinese come across our border in the last, since probably October, I think. I've met them, I've seen them, I've met them. I can almost never interview them because of the language barrier, unfortunately. I've tried it on my international interpretation app on my phone, but they don't want to talk anyway. They're all very highly coached, and all I can really tell you about the Chinese is that they are flying mainly into Ecuador as tourists to go to the Galapagos Islands, right? They're not going to the Galapagos Islands. It's that the visa requirements in Ecuador are non-existent, so everybody takes advantage. All those people are great percentages of those people coming through the Darien Gap, enter South America through Ecuador under this visa-free process. What I have written frequently is that I believe that there are Chinese spies among them. We will find out over the next 5 years or whatever. I mean, they're spies. Their job is to hide themselves. That there are spies coming through, and probably PLA military guys as well, or that at least served in the PLA and are working with their criminal or with their intelligence services. I hope our CIA and our FBI are working on this, but fingers crossed.
You said there were hundreds of buses that typically line up at the border, and they'll board buses and depart for wherever. Mm-hmm. Who's paying for those buses? Is there any record made of, these buses, who's paying and where they're going?
I've seen it. I've seen that work. He's asking about all the buses. I've seen that work in a couple of different ways. One is non-governmental organizations on the border are working under contract with CBP to help them manage the crisis. So Border Patrol picks them up at the border, just wet feet, the whole thing, processes them in the field station, takes them to a hard brick and mortar place for 1 day. In this 1 day, they will get their papers, personal recognizance release, date to turn yourself in wherever city you want to go. Then they load them on a big white bus and drive them to the NGO. The NGO then helps them arrange for bus fare. It could be Greyhound buses. I've seen them like Catholic Charities in McAllen. I just spent a whole day with them, not with them, but in McAllen, Texas. They've got a huge operation where it's pouring through. They're right across from the commercial bus station. I went over there and just watched them buying their bus tickets and getting onto Greyhound buses. Other NGOs charter buses. So they arrange for a charter bus. If enough people are going to Miami, they'll charter a bus to Miami, and the migrants are paying for their bus tickets, unless it's paid for by Texas. Sometimes Texas they want to ship them up to New York and some of these other places. Texas, I want to point out, Texas is not putting them on the buses. It's voluntary. They're saying, if you're going to New York, I got a free passage for you. Texas will pick up your fee to these blue cities. But they're not being forced to go to anywhere.
Well, Mayor Adams of New York last week said he's had 110,000 migrants show up in New York City. But Governor Abbott said he only sent 13,000. So
Yeah,
there's another 100,000 that got there some other way.
Right. Plus, the 13,000 would have gone anyway. They would have just paid the $150 ticket on their own. They wanted to go to New York. They just got a free bus fare from Texas. Abbott's not putting them on. DeSantis isn't forcing anybody on. They have to sign a voluntary disclosure thing saying, I volunteer to get on this bus. And one other thing is, long before Abbott started doing the free bus fare, for like a year and a half, immigrants were just pouring into New York. This isn't some new thing. This has been going on for a year and a half before Adams ever said a single word about it. And there were stories in the local press about how they were just, flooding school districts and causing all kinds of problems, and this was way before Adams said a single word about it. There's a lot more than 100,000 that went to New York. I'd say 250,000 went to New York. They're just complaining about it now.
So I'm seeing reports from some of our southern states about significant increases in tropical disease, such as dengue fever, drug-resistant tuberculosis. No one seems to talk about that. Have you been able to correlate any of these disease outbreaks with the number of illegals crossing into these various areas?
I have not done it myself. The Center for Immigration Studies hasn't gotten there yet, but there is credible reporting. The CDC just reported, they put a report out that they found leprosy in Florida, and that it was associated with the migration coming in off the border. Leprosy. I thought would defeated that thing. What are we going to have, leprosy colonies again? I don't know. And the children, by the way, that are coming in, remember, it's family units still, aren't vaccinated. So when they go to enroll in school, they are not vaccinated. And we're like, oh, okay, forget those laws and rules.
Constitutionally, isn't the government to protect us from our enemies, foreign and domestic? And/or why isn't Congress doing something to stop this? Because this is a runaway problem by what seems to be a dictatorial president.
Yeah, why isn't Congress doing something? Because they're split. They're partisaned out. They can't get together enough to do anything. And so power flows to the White House on this. It becomes an executive power. And they're using their executive power in illegal ways that are under a variety of different kinds of litigation and challenges that are just going to take a little bit of time to work their way through to the Supreme Court. But Congress can't do jack about this. and neither can the states, in my opinion. This is a federal, this is a central government policy issue. You have to be able to deport.
One more thing, too. Several years ago, I heard that even if these people come in and they don't vote, the ultimate goal will be to place them in states where they can affect the Electoral College and the numbers that will shake the balance of that by maybe they go to red states or they're blue where they're sheltered for a while, but now they're disseminating them out to where they can affect that balance of the Electoral College. So that would be their goal, to win over more of that portion of our voting system. So.
Yeah, I think that there's some validity to that. I don't know if it's a master control thing, though. Abbott should be offering free bus rides to red states or something, to beef up the...
The globalists are on the move, though, so this is probably part of their plan.
I mean, here's why I think it's happening. There's the old journalist in me, I feel the hook coming out, but if you read chapter 4 of my book, if you want to get my book, read chapter 4, is a detailed description of the political ideology of the people that Biden cut a deal with to get past the primaries, and then over the hump in the general. Those people are this extreme, potent. Think Bernie Sanders left, that he had to cut a deal with, and they got the immigration portfolio. And within those, that constituency are people that work for NGOs that do refugee resettlement and do migrant help and all that kind of stuff. That's what they do for a living. Well, they orchestrated these policies from the beginning. These open borders policies, the ideology, all comes from that, what I call the migrant advocacy industrial complex, because that's what it is. It's a whole constellation of hundreds, if not thousands, of small, medium, and large organizations that are nonprofit that deal with this. And guess who's getting the $150 million federal contracts? They are. They are getting billions of dollars in federal contracts to help the federal government manage this. So why wouldn't you put forth policies that are going to enrich you? Eisenhower warned about this with the industrial defense complex. Don't let them get too powerful, or we'll be at war every year for the rest of our nation's life, so that they can sell bombs and bullets. Well, it's the same with the NGOs. These groups are pushing these policies that are bringing in millions of people, enriching them every single day, every single year. And the day that a Republican turns those spigots off down at the border is the day that money stops. So the old journalist in me kind of
thinks that's a factor. All right, Todd Bensman, thank you very much.